Hello and welcome to Halcyon, where in this episode I'd like to begin, if I may, with a slightly loaded question. Can you tell the difference between these 5 games? Look a little bit closer, get a good look. Still can't tell the difference? Well, you wouldn't be alone in that assessment. FIFA has become a franchise synonymous with a lack of innovation, repetitive and overused game mechanics, and an emphasis on marketing with style over substance. Much of which is in the same vein as, say, Battlefield, Call of Duty, WWE 2K, and a myriad of game series that are released year by year, cranking out to try and make the most money as humanly possible within a short period of time. I myself have long held this belief. In fact, year by year, I've noticed that these games don't even innovate, don't improve, they actually get worse, with a number of issues, including the AI becoming worse progressively each year, and a number of bugs in number 13 specifically that I felt set the game back a long way. And more to the point, that the games are so unresponsive that I'm now on my 4th Xbox controller because there's no way that wasn't a penalty, and you know it, FIFA! But after delving into it a little bit more thoroughly, I found that maybe there's a little bit more to it than that. And after looking at footballing in general and the gaming series over the last 20 years, I wanted to try and find out why not only gamers tolerate this kind of behaviour, but also more to the point why the franchise is even more popular than ever. And to see if EA do anything more than simply swapping Lionel Messi for Wayne Rooney to try and improve. So, this week, I present to you FIFA, a retrospective.
People say football never changes.
EA Sports. It's in the game.
We see it differently.
Before we get into the more recent titles and the most recent release upcoming of FIFA 17, I thought it might be a good idea to look back at the history of football gaming in general, starting, if I may, with my first football experience, FIFA 98. This is about as good as it got back in 1998. Polygons were still in use and a lot of the game was mainly based around whoever could run the ball into the net first, because there was no such thing as a dynamic way of playing. The only other way to score was predominantly to cross the ball in from a corner, or if you figured out a cheat like I did, was to simply kick the ball to the near post from the corner and let the person score the header. It was a reasonable facsimile of football at the time, but it still lacked that certain something, and based on the international scene it also felt limited and fairly restrained in the sense that you never felt a sense of any change or any progression in the way that you played. But when you consider that FIFA looked like this to begin with, it's easy to appreciate just how far they came in the relatively short space of time between 1993 and 1998. Despite the game being overall clunky, cartoonish, and frankly a fairly poor representation of the game we know as football, it's charming and quaint in its own right. However, FIFA was always envisaged to bring a more realistic take to the genre of football games, and so they knew they had to evolve at some stage and bring a sense of reality to an otherwise fictional gaming genre. And from the period of 1995 all the way up to 2005, you can see an evolution in the difference of play, in the interaction of the players, in the abilities the players possess on the ball, and of course going beyond 2005 up to 2010, 15 and so on, you can see an evolution of the graphics, making it more believable, highlights in the weather, differences in the tone of the pitches, subtle differences that really emphasise the fact that they've looked into and they've tried to appreciate the atmosphere of a football game, to the point now where they have licenses all over the world for virtually every player who use the game itself as a marketing tool. Which leads on to a very interesting point to make. It seems odd to say it now, but back when FIFA was originally conceived, using real team names and player names wasn't commonplace, with a lot of developers opting to go for a more cartoony or stylized form of gaming. It was charming in its own right, but it didn't speak to that more realistic style of play that players really wanted to engage with. Even skipping forward to when I first started gaming with football games, this is still very much the norm, with games like FIFA 98 and ISS Pro still utilising very clever subtextual names like Rolando instead of Ronaldo. The reason I feel that FIFA's become a barometer by which other football games have been measured is mainly down to the fact that in the early decades of their releases you could tell that they were always striving for something more, something better, something more realistic, and weren't afraid to rewrite their DNA in order to accomplish this. Not only is it visible from the strides in the visualizations and the way that the players move, it's also the fact that its content surpassed its competition, and you can tell this from the period of 1995 when the series first picked up steam, all the way through 2005 when the more commercial aspects were starting to be introduced on a regular basis, with players being utilised on the front cover that people knew. As opposed to something like, let's say, Pro Evolution Soccer, which always stuck to the same format on a regular basis and simply tried to add a new gimmick or niche that would hopefully entice players into playing that particular year. Some of the additions, like the interactivity of the ball, the interactions between the players and the crowd, the referee, the way they moved, the fact that you could customise menus, the fact that you could swap teams, and finally get into the transfers between players within a campaign mode. Innovations that set FIFA apart from its competition and continue to hold it up to this day are some of the reasons why, again, particularly between 1995 when the series picked up steam to 2005 when the more commercial aspect was introduced, i.e. using players that people were familiar with to peddle the product. It all summed up to make FIFA a more complete package than its competitors and had a sense of completeness and realism that, because its competitors decided to continue to opt for that cartoony, fictionalized version of a football game, could not keep up. And as a result, FIFA opened up a fairly hefty reputation when it came to being the most prominent game in the footballing community. Which brings me to my next point: the gameplay, presentation, and overall feel of the more recent releases. The gameplay in FIFA has always been laid out, generally speaking, in the same style, with the front buttons acting as the main actions, with the rear and supplemental buttons adding actions or tweaking the actions of the in-game avatars. However, while people can criticise this approach, in my opinion, this has been a plus to the series because it ensures an immediate familiarity with the controls and gives players an idea of what the basic layout of the control will be in advance, meaning that new and old players can become very quickly proficient at the game, while also integrating new styles and techniques that EA decide to bring out on a regular basis. As you can see here from the FIFA 12 slot that I've put up, generally speaking, the way the game is played hasn't changed a tremendous amount in that time either, which means that players can employ tactics from previous games with varying degrees of success. Now, the only problem I have with this is that between the games of FIFA 12 and 16, which are the ones that I've had the opportunity to review, the only thing that seems to stand out in my mind is the lack of connectivity and lack of responsiveness when playing the game. Now, the developers will attribute this to trying to give the game a more realistic feel, i.e. the players will make mistakes, and by comparison the player will make mistakes. But the only problem with this is it just leads to frustration, with a lot of players often citing the fact that they don't feel like what they're doing translates into the game. I have to admit, this is a criticism I too share. It's not enough to say striving for realism is by making the game worse. You have to think of other ways of making the interactivity more engaging. And this immersion factor is broken even further when you consider that the pass functions have remained broadly speaking the same. You still ping balls from one end of the pitch to the other, irrespective of the skill level of the player you happen to be utilising. Yet in the same move, trying to dribble or shoot often leaves the player screaming at the top of their lungs, why is it not doing what I'm telling it to do? Again, this is a criticism that could be levelled at most football games these days because, like FIFA, other games have succumbed to this idea of realism translating to lack of responsiveness. However, FIFA 16 has more in-game abilities and tricks than ever before. And for those who use them, they can be an astute addition, giving them a slight competitive edge over their more lacklustre opponents. But in terms of development from 12 to 16, there have been next to no additions to the campaign mode for sure, and indeed to a certain extent the system multiplayer modes between games is immensely disappointing, especially considering that game to game, the only reason as a casual player you may be tempted to pick up the next version would be to have an up-to-date club strip of your favourite team. Which, when you consider other games offer updated rosters on DLC packs that are usually free, it's not a good enough reason for an annual release. However, to fully appreciate what I've just said, I think it's only pertinent to show you what you go through when you play one of these games. So for the next section, I won't preface it with some kind of clever anecdote. Simply an apology for two grown men acting in such a immature manner. But I present to you a FIFA Retrospective playthrough. Hello and welcome to Halcyon playthrough. It's my good friend Ryan.
You did?
I lied, he's not really a friend. Anyway, we're going to be playing FIFA 16 to give you an idea of the gameplay and the reactions that people go through when they're playing this game.
Now,
Alright, fine. Arsenal v Arsenal, the original format.
I don't think
Okay,
you're ready for this.
do this. Come on. Play it through. Sanchez, guarantee goal coming up. Come on. There's no way Gabriel is Usain Bolt in this game, is he?
So underrated.
Do me a favour. So underrated.
Did you
No,
know?
sorry. Did I not?
He
What?
races better in for fun.
Does he?
Yeah.
Does he? Sanchez, mate, you've not scored yet. What's going on? Have you okay? Them pay.
Really? I don't know how you always do that. But the defenders just have a day off and it's nah, I can't go.
It's Santi Cazorla, mate. Everyone knows he can jump 10 feet.
Yes. Renowned for his high jump.
Oh! Oh! No! Oh my God! Do you reckon people know I've scored?
I don't think they
Right. 1-0. It's a thrashing already. Really?
do. Fuck you! That's what happens. You mess with the Ozil, my boy.
Is it again? He's like Rudiger and Nistelrooy in this game.
Hey.
And on his right foot!
He's the German.
And on his right foot! Well, of course!
I'll call him the German Bergkamp, of course.
German Bergkamp.
But
I can't believe you're playing Danny Welbeck.
why not?
Because in this game, all he does is run in a straight line. He doesn't do anything else. Fuck's sake.
But when you've got Mesut Ozil, you don't need anybody
Anyway,
else.
back to more serious matters. This game cheats. Game cheats, alright? Playing along, knocking balls into the back of the net, thrashing someone 1-0, and suddenly Mesut Ozil decides he's Ruud van Nistelrooy and decides to score every single time he gets on the ball. Giroud, mate. Giroud!
He's nobody. He's a nobody. Giroud's a nobody. He can't finish his dinner.
Come on, there Ozil's already got 2 goals. Not again, not again, not again. Oh, yeah, just let it run. I'm sure someone else will pick it up.
Oh!
Fuck this game and all it stands for.
I don't think it is. I think you should play the same thing.
I think you need to have a big old glass. Shut up, Juice! Ozil, you need to get in the game and start banging in goals.
Shut up, Drew Squad.
Dude,
Oh.
every time, unless you hit it sweet as you like, it never comes off. Check, you need to get to that.
Oh!
Get rid of it! How did you miss that?
Oh, I do not have a clue.
Fuck it. Come on, be a good sport and give me the ball.
Oh,
Come on.
I had it anyway.
This game.
Some more of that shut up juice.
Right.
Never mind.
You feel pretty smug with yourself right now, don't
Oh, I feel really smug. Losing all day. First time on video. 3-2.
you? Twice before this one. I need it recorded.
There's always next time.
Great. However, the reason for this is simple. A shift to the online gaming community, which has opened the door to a number of different revenue streams for not only EA, but a number of other companies, including DLC and microtransactions, which is another subject for another time. Suffice it to say though, I feel that this shift in emphasis has stifled FIFA's creativity in recent years, with them often citing to do DLC packs for players. Things like Team of the Year editions, Team of the Season editions, In-Form editions that are geared more towards that forward culture of I must have this, rather than the culture that we used to have, which is the best game and which do I prefer to play with my mates. And as a result of this, I feel that it makes the games feel less unique year by year. Less like a brand new release, or like an updated version of the previous game with the more recent kits, team updates, and maybe a few training exercises that may help you get better? You know what buttons to press and you're still not screaming at the controller to do what I'm telling it to do.
The current iteration will be the last in the current in-game engine before EA opts to switch to Frostbite, which they say will offer even more realistic in-game visuals, slicker and more refined gameplay. However, this is always the big selling point with each game, simply with a different tagline, from "Be the 12th man" to "Play beautiful." However, as always, they have teased brand new modes which may yet prove to be interesting additions, such as the Journey mode, which incorporates a sense of story progression, i.e. you have a character and you can select multiple conversation options. However, to date, the closest thing to a new idea has been the ability to play in the third person mode as a player on the pitch, which at first was an interesting concept, bearing in mind that it wasn't fleshed out, but it had a myriad of possibilities. However, since this uses the same mechanics engine as the normal game, only from a third person perspective, and has no deviation from the normal coach campaign mode in any meaningful way in terms of your own character's progression or interesting features that can add to the game, I wouldn't call this much of a selling point, since this has not been improved upon since its inception in any meaningful or long-lasting way.
And while there are more training modes and customization options than ever, and the addition of the women's game is a long overdue and welcome addition, even if it did take an online petition of over 100,000 signatures in 24 hours to achieve, each game still feels like it's lacking somewhat in ambition or innovation, leaving each edition feeling exactly the same as the last. And the emphasis on the online competition has meant that in recent years I've become disillusioned, because a lot of online game includes mainly getting cussed out by a 12-year-old who spent way more time with it than you have, a barrage of verbal and visual abuse, and often a devolution of play into cheat tactics and buggy gameplay. I remember fondly my first online game, where the ball was kicked from the halfway line over to Ibrahimovic to score within a 3-second period. This happened 3 or 4 times during the course of the game. Admittedly, that's just me not being able to keep up with the tactics of the day, but I still feel that an intelligent developer will make sure that things like that are stamped out immediately to make sure that fairness and competitiveness are what make the game so compelling to play, rather than trying to get one up on whoever stitched you up in the previous one.
The presentation of the game is as slick as ever, with EA track listings always very hit and miss in my opinion, but something I enjoy year by year, picking out the songs that I like and picking out the songs that may sound a bit peculiar, but you kind of grow to put them to the background as you're using the rest of the game. The menus have again seen little in the way of improvement, with specifically 14 through 16 seeing incredibly little difference in terms of, as far as I can see, only different colour palettes distinguishing between them. Even between generations of console, and the addition of the packs and player cards are reminiscent of the Pokemon trading cards or even the football sticker annuals, which create that same sense of collector mentality, always needing something more or something even more powerful or impressive in terms of their inventory of players, coaches, overall quality of teams, which engages players to really go in with the online play more than perhaps they would have done had that facility not been there. To their credit, EA has attempted to experiment with original concepts before, such as the FIFA Street series that take place within a urban environment and take the skill-based aspect of football games and adapts it to 5v5 or 3v3 games that are more in tune with arcade-style, fast-paced, elaborate and short-timed games that are geared more towards instant gratification as opposed to the more considered and realistic gameplay that FIFA has been designed towards. However, again, as a means of innovation, this feels half-baked in the sense that each FIFA Street follows the same pattern of each release feeling like a simply updated version of its predecessor rather than an entirely new release itself.
While there are a number of reasons to become frustrated at the series, and speaking as an Arsenal fan from the age of 6, I can attest to how frustrating it can be to see a team or a company make the same mistakes and hear the same criticisms year after year after year, only to overlook them in favour of, well, we're still getting paid, so it must be working. However, this attitude can grate on even the most ardent of fans, and I don't blame people for having this kind of attitude towards the series that continues to have some form of disconnect with its audience, in the sense that most people do appreciate the additions year by year of slicker gameplay, better graphics, but they want to be challenged, they want to be shown something they've never seen before. Despite these criticisms though, there is no denying one fact. It is still immensely satisfying playing the damn game. And yes, it's flawed. And yes, it is still essentially the same game we've been playing for the past 5 years at the very least. But that does not change one simple fact.
It's still satisfying as hell. Nothing I've said detracts from the joy players feel in certain situations. I mean, everyone will attest to the frustration and, for the flip side, elation when you realise that you're one-on-one with the goalkeeper, you have a teammate to your right. What are you going to do? Are you going to try and shoot past an EA goalkeeper with AI like Buffon or Casillas or Neuer, where you know it's going to save it? Or are you going to gently slot it to the right hand side and let the rage ensue? The outcome is inevitable, and it's tested as many friendships as any game of Mario Kart, and he will.
But none of the criticisms that I've levelled at the game so far take anything away from the satisfaction it feels to be one-on-one in certain situations, or to know the sweet joy of hitting a ball in the absolute perfect way and seeing the look of abject failure in an opponent's face. And that's why I feel year on year we continue to play. Even if the same criticisms are going to be levelled at it, and even if FIFA 17, which they promise of course will be even slicker, even better, with more options than you've ever had before in terms of single player and online competitive play, we continue to buy it, and we continue to line up to pay £1 to hand our old version back, and £40 to have the brand new sweet clean version that they put out each year. Overall, I can see why people have become jaded with the game series as a whole. I really do. The fact that it appeals in many cases to the lowest common denominator of fans, lack of innovation, and again, as I've said at the beginning, a devolution of the AI system does nothing to assist the series going forward. However, when you consider the pace of competition in the early 90s and early 2000s specifically, and how far we've really come since those early days of gaming when it was simply pixels on a screen, charming or not, to now where the game is crafted into an experience of its own, I'm thankful we have the series. And I'm thankful that they continue to develop it. And especially considering when you compare FIFA to its competition, there's still no doubt it is the premier choice for the gamer. It speaks to everything that a gamer wants in terms of instant satisfaction and gratification, a sense of progression in a sense with the hoarder mentality, but more to the point, its gameplay still can't be argued that when you get it right and you've beaten the mechanics of the game and it lets you do what you want to do, it is still immensely satisfying to play, even after 20 years worth of releases. I simply hope that for the next game release, the developers opt to go for a sense of freshness, a challenge to the player to learn something new, and looking at us as, well, gamers first instead of consumers first. But when you think this is coming from a company called EA, you've got more of a chance of seeing pigs fly and a snowball fight breaking out in hell with Michael Jackson the winner. In any event, hey there, thank you so much for watching the show. We really hope you enjoyed it. I hope you tune in next week for the next review. It's going to be on something a little bit more up to date. Hopefully that's going to entice a few more people in. In the meantime, I hope you check out the Batman review that I posted here, the podcast here, worth giving either one of those a listen. And indeed, if you have any more questions or queries or suggestions, or if you can, follow me on Facebook and Twitter and support the show as much as possible, I'd really, really appreciate it. So until the next episode, take care, and I'll see you soon.